Hello and welcome to the Week 13 edition of the Draft Report. My name is Matt Brown. As always, this is brought to you by DFSReport.com. Head over to DFSReport.com for all of your daily fantasy needs. And of course, we're going to be talking about draft here. So be sure and head to your favorite app store or draft.com. When you do that, use the promo code REPORT, REPORT, and that's going to get you a free $3 entry into a real money contest whenever you make your first deposit. Week 12 was weird. Week 12 was not the most profitable week for me anyway. Had far too much Kareem Hunt. But week 12 is behind us. We will be looking here into week 13. At the quarterback position, this is going to be odd whenever we start to look at these quarterbacks that we're going to be considering this week. I mean, listen, let's talk about the guys that you're really looking at when it comes to head-to-heads. You know, head-to-heads and three-mans. I mean, it's basically going to be Russell Wilson and Tom Brady at the very, very top of that list. I mean, when you look at this, I don't necessarily love this matchup for Seattle. I actually think that Philadelphia is going to roll here. But here's the thing, in daily fantasy, the great thing about that is when a team gets behind, the quarterback just has to throw basically every single down. And so that's what we're going to be looking at here for Russell Wilson going up against this Eagles team. Russell Wilson's also basically like their number one runner as well, too. I mean, he's having to run for his life. Offensive line has been complete garbage, and so he is having to do it all. So getting you a real high floor and, of course, has a ceiling as well. Tom Brady, same deal, just the highest floor basically of any quarterback. And in head-to-heads, that's just basically where we're going to go. We are going to be looking at him, and even in three-mans, we're going to be trying to get a hold of Tom Brady against a Buffalo team that really and truly has fallen off a cliff here. As far as defense goes over the last month or so. Next tier of quarterbacks we're kind of going to be looking at: Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers. Those guys right there are guys that we're all going to be considering this week. Whenever you look at Cam Newton, you say, well, what about this situation with New Orleans? His defense has been playing much better. They are playing much better. Both cornerbacks missed last week. Crawley is going to be back this week. Lattimore is questionable. You need to take a look at that injury report on Sunday morning. If Lattimore comes back, that's going to tick Cam Newton way down our list here. But if there's still going to be a vulnerable side of the field with Lattimore being out, then that's certainly something we're going to take advantage of. And listen, they're going to be missing one of their safeties as well there for New Orleans. So I think Cam probably is going to have a pretty good day regardless. Like I said, I really like this Eagles team. I think they roll against Seattle. So got to love me some Carson Wentz. And Phillip Rivers going up against Cleveland. Do I need to tell you why to like Phillip Rivers in a matchup against Cleveland? I don't think so. It's Cleveland. They're terrible. You're going to play Phillip Rivers. Probably my number 3 quarterback behind Wilson and Brady this week whenever I'm looking at guys that I'm going to be targeting. Now, whenever we get kind of deeper into these, 8-teamers, 10-teamers, something like that, and we can't get one of these super upper tier quarterbacks, we're going to have to take someone that we don't feel completely comfortable with. And let's go ahead and take a guy that we feel very uncomfortable with and talk here about Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston going up against the Green Bay Packers this week. Look, Jameis Winston coming back off of missing 3 straight games with a shoulder injury. This team has absolutely no reason to bring back Jameis Winston if he is not healthy. So it leads me to believe that he is going to be good to go against a really bad Green Bay secondary, bringing him back basically in one of the best matchups he could possibly have. Packers 31st in completion percentage allowed. They are 28th in yards per attempt allowed to quarterbacks. They are 25th in yards and passing yards allowed per game. They are 22nd in DVOA versus the pass. I mean, there are just so many things here to really love about this matchup with Green Bay. And then if you want to go even further, running back Doug Martin's going to be out with a concussion. So you've got even more reason for Jameis Winston to take to the air. And of course, he's got, his weapons in Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson, and Cameron Brate finally might show back up after his absence with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. He was basically persona non grata there, but hey, maybe he will actually be fantasy relevant yet again. I know it's not going to feel great clicking on Jameis Winston's name, but I think he's probably a top 10 quarterback this week. And when you consider the matchup here, and like I said, you just have to assume that he's healthy because, again, the Bucs pretty much, definitely out of it when it comes to the playoff contention. So what incentive do they have to bring him back if he's not healthy. So I think we can look at a healthy Jameis Winston this week, and Jameis Winston is going to be someone that we're going to be targeting. One of the guys that I definitely don't think you should fade is Drew Brees. That being said, I think there's reasons to not like Drew Brees this week. I mean, one of the things is the defense has just been playing so much better for them. And also the running game has just been so good that Drew Brees just doesn't have to do it all like he used to have to do. I mean, whenever you look at this, the Saints have been getting up in games, and when they do that, I mean, you just can't. It's very, very hard to play a guy that's going to be, going much higher than he probably should. And he's going to be, maybe doesn't need all those pass attempts. I mean, they're going to be down a defensive end. The Panthers are. And then you got that, the tandem there of Kamara and Ingram. I think that probably Drew Brees, again, if he fell to me in the right spot, a guy I wouldn't think twice about taking, but I don't think I'm going to be reaching for him, looking real crazy this week. One of the other guys that we hate to click on, but I think, again, when you look at the matchup, you really just have to click on him anyways. Josh McCown. He's actually been pretty good so far this year, Josh McCown. I mean, when you look at this matchup with Kansas City, this defense has absolutely fallen apart. It's a home game here for Josh McCown. Kansas City's going to be on the road, thinking about how terrible they've been playing over the last few weeks. I think this defense is very beatable. Whenever you look at the secondary, yeah, they have some guys that are playmakers, but they also risk. They're very risky in their coverage. And when they do that, sometimes these big plays happen. You got a guy like Robbie Anderson at wide receiver. I think that he could have a big game as well. So definitely looking at Josh McCown this week. Looking at running backs this week, I mean, listen, it's the same old whenever we start to look at the guys that we're really going to target. I mean, Todd Gurley, just an absolute beast, volume monster there for LA, and going up against Arizona that isn't like really a cush matchup, but you just can't argue with a guy that is getting basically all the touches in the backfield, getting pass work, getting all the goal line work. I mean, there's just so much to love about Todd Gurley. And the way that he's produced this year, you just have to keep rostering him. You keep having to go after him. You keep having to play him every single week. Matchup proof type of guy. If you want to look at the matchup here about a guy that's highly inefficient, that's going to be Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon doesn't average a whole lot per carry. And really, when you watch him play, he kind of doesn't look all that good. Doesn't look like he's really that great of a player. But this Cleveland matchup in a game where they are favored by 14 points, a home favorite of 14 points for running backs is just so massive. And you just expect this Chargers team to get up here. And when they get up, they're just going to run the ball and salt the clock, and Cleveland's going to give it up. And you expect some short fields here for Kaiser to turn it over. Their defense plays very good in the secondary, and also real ferocious pass rush there for the Chargers. So I expect them to get after Kaiser a lot, and expect this to be a good game for Melvin Gordon. Kareem Hunt, I just talked about. I mean, and it kind of about this Chiefs team and how they've fallen apart. Now, listen, he is no longer an RB1 this week. It's basically where it's at. But whenever you look, I mean, we have to have 2 running backs. If you're in a 10-team league, that means 20 running backs are going to go. Is Kareem Hunt not worth drafting in 20 running backs? The answer is no. I mean, you have to draft him here. And you look at this matchup against the Jets, and it should be good. They have just really confused themselves on offense and don't know what they're doing anymore. Hopefully they figure out that they need to get back to just force feeding Kareem Hunt, but we don't really know. But again, not a guy that I consider to be an RB1 this week, but he's going to be an RB2, so you have to take him in drafts. The guy that I am going to be reaching for this week, and hopefully people let him fall to me because he's coming off of a pretty bad game and then has been, kind of hit and miss here this year, is Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette, going up against Indianapolis here. Listen, one of the big things, he practiced in full all week long, and that is really good for us that he practiced in full all week long. It's been a while since he's done that. The Jags are big 10-point favorites at home. Big favorites here. So we love big home favorites for running backs. We like them to get up. We like them to salt the clock here. 17 rush attempts in 7 of the 9 games that he's played this year. So, I mean, he's getting all of the volume there. Sure, he's going to give up a couple carries here and there, but he's getting the bulk of the load, and that's what we want in our running backs. He's averaging over 3 targets a game, so we're getting a little bit there in the pass game as well. And then if you look at this Colts team, they've allowed the 6th most fantasy points to running backs. They're 28th in yards per carry allowed. They're 24th in rushing yards per game allowed. So everything points to Leonard Fournette being able to bounce back here and have a really good game. And like I said, he's a guy that's burned a lot of people here recently, so maybe he falls to you in a very nice spot this week. course, both Saints running backs are always in play. This team is just really, really putting up points. And even against the Carolina defense that I expect to play pretty well, I don't think this game is going to be a shootout of any sort. I think that actually be relatively low scoring for what you would consider in a Saints Panthers game. But both of these running backs are just getting so much volume here. And with the Kamara's pass game more usage, just a guy that we've got to consider, a guy that we've got to continue to go with. Another guy that I haven't rostered all year long, and I'm actually going to be looking at this week, is Marshawn Lynch. Whenever you look at this, going up against the Giants on a team that's just absolutely quit on the season here, and then, of course, you're going to have Geno Smith taking over at quarterback there for the Giants, and so I expect some turnovers here. I expect Oakland to be able to get some short fields, a couple of short fields, and Marshawn Lynch to be able to convert that into touchdowns, and then also, not to mention this Giants defense has just been getting absolutely torched on the ground as it is anyway. So Marshawn Lynch, a guy, like I said, guy I hadn't rostered all year long, is a guy that's actually going to be pretty high on my list this week. Guys that I look, I never played DeMarco Murray. I'm not going to start this week. I think that he is by far the second best running back on that team, with Derrick Henry being number one by a landslide. And I think it's only a matter of time until they finally figure out that they should be going with Derrick Henry. So I'm not going to play DeMarco Murray this week. Devontae Freeman comes back this week after missing a few weeks with concussion, which takes Tevin Coleman off the board. That kind of sucks because Tevin Coleman has been awesome whenever he was the feature back there for the Falcons. Now that they're both back, kind of takes both of them out of play for me. Probably not guys I'm going to be going after. I do think a guy that I'm going to be going after this week, though, is Duke Johnson. What happens here is I expect this Chargers team to get out to a lead really quickly, get out to a lead really fast, get out to a big lead. And they're going to pull Isaiah Crowell off the field, and they're going to throw every single down, and they're going to have Duke Johnson in there. He's going to get all those dump-off passes. I think Duke Johnson's a pretty sneaky, sharp play this week. If you want to play Russian roulette with the New England Patriots backs, go right ahead. I do think you can narrow it down a little bit to two. I mean, obviously, it's Burkhead and Deion Lewis. Those are the guys that are getting the bulk of everything. When you look last week, they basically had the exact same workload, same amount of touches, same amount of snaps played, everything like that. So it really comes down to who's going to get in the end zone for those guys. Maybe you play multiple lineups, and maybe you try to get a hold of one of each of those guys in your multiple lineups there. And finally, this week, look, I mean, I don't like really clicking at all on a guy like Lamar Miller, but I mean, look, this Tennessee defense is just no good at every level. They're no good whatsoever. I think Houston scores on this team. I think Houston's able to move the ball. So I hate playing Lamar Miller. I don't like playing that type of guy because I don't like playing running backs on teams that are bad. But I don't think Houston struggles in this game against Tennessee. I actually think that they play pretty well here and move the ball in Tennessee. So Lamar Miller, a guy that's not usually on my radar either, that I'm certainly going to be looking at this week. Finally, let's talk pass catchers here. Look, I mean, New England, sure, play Cooks. One of the good things is Hogan is out. So with Hogan being out, Cooks gets all the wide receiver looks there. So Cooks is in play. You can play Gronk as well. Of course, we say pass catchers because you don't have to limit that to wide receivers. You can have tight ends as well. Gronk, obviously, always a 2-touchdown. I mean, we saw last week, he's always a 2-touchdown threat. So that's what we love whenever we're trying to do this. Julio Jones going up against Minnesota this week. Obviously, Julio just erupted last week, the huge 12 catch, 250-yard, couple touchdown game that we've been waiting on all year long. This week, he's going to get Xavier Rhodes in shadow coverage. That doesn't mean Julio Jones can't win. Julio Jones is going to be able to win a lot of the time, but the thing is he will be limited on other things. You know, you're talking about Xavier Rhodes, who Julio's going to beat on occasion, but, you know, a lot of the times Julio's just much, much bigger than the corners. He's able to just high point the ball and get it and stuff like that. And Xavier Rhodes is a real big, long-armed corner. I don't expect Julio to get those type of passes and have success in that game. Not to say I'm not going to be looking at Julio this week, just saying that temper your expectations here. It's not going to be like another Julio eruption spot. Keenan Allen, what do I have to say about the Chargers team? Obviously, if I love Phillip Rivers, if I love Melvin Gordon, then I got to love Keenan Allen here. I think they put up a ton of points on Cleveland, so he's got to be one of our top plays this week. I told you if I like Jameis Winston, I got to like his number one pass catcher. So Mike Evans, probably a correlation play for me. If I get Jameis Winston, you know, if I'm a little bit later, I'm going to be looking. If I get Mike Evans in a draft, because obviously I would take Evans before I would take Jameis Winston. If I get Mike Evans, I'm certainly going to be going after Jameis and look for that upside there with that correlation play. A wide receiver here that is a guy that I've rostered earlier in the season, and then as everything started falling apart and the wheels fell off, that I really kind of left, and he got injured as well, and I kind of left him alone. But I'm going to go back to the well this week with Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, listen, we finally get Trevor Siemian back under center, and I understand that Trevor Siemian is certainly not anybody that's lighting the world on fire, but he is by far the best quarterback there in Denver. It's not even close. And look, when he came in, he looked all right. I mean, he was able to move the ball, and he certainly has better rapport with Emmanuel Sanders than any of the other two guys. And look at Emmanuel Sanders, like in all the full games he's played when he hasn't gotten hurt, he's averaging 9 targets a game. So the volume is there. And then you look at this matchup, Dolphins ranked 31st DVOA versus the pass, 24th in yards per attempt allowed. They got a couple of corners starting for them that are 77th and 119th in Pro Football Focus's ratings. By the way, that's 119th out of 119. So they actually have the worst rated corner in all of football this year. Teams are passing 62% of the time against the Dolphins, probably because of everything that I just said. I mean, it's just much easier to pass on these guys. Third fewest sacks in the NFL as well, the Dolphins. So they're not going to be getting all up in Simeon's face here. They've only got 18 sacks on the whole year. And if you look at this team, I mean, again, we've seen them fall apart over the last month. They've given up 36.7 points per game over the last 3 weeks, and they have given up the most passes of 15 plus yards over the last month as well. So Emmanuel Sanders, a guy that I think is a pretty sharp play, maybe not your wide receiver 1, but certainly a wide receiver 2 this week. DeAndre Hopkins, you just can't avoid the volume. I mean, anymore. I mean, I listen, it doesn't even matter about the matchups. He just gets the ball thrown to him a dozen plus times a game. So he doesn't even have to be efficient. DeAndre Hopkins is going to be really high on my list because I love this matchup against Tennessee. I think he might be probably my number 2 overall wide receiver this week. Adam Thielen getting all the volume there. Doug Baldwin, I'm done. Listen, the thing about Russell Wilson is he just has to scramble and throw and make all these weird plays happen. And a lot of times it's just doing things on the fly. And I don't think he has a preferred really receiver in between the 20s. And then when he gets in the red zone, everything goes to Jimmy Graham. So for me, I'm going to be off of Doug Baldwin until I see really otherwise. Devontae Adams, by far Brett Hundley's favorite target. So certainly going to be looking at Devontae Adams in a matchup with this putrid Tampa secondary in Tampa. Tampa's secondary is absolutely horrible. Love me some Devontae Adams this week. Devin Funchess, not on the injury report, did hurt his toe last week, but looks like he's going to be good to go against New Orleans. We're going to really monitor the Lattimore situation there. If Lattimore's out, I think Funchess is a fire up. If he's not, if Lattimore's in, I'm going to be fading Funchess in that one. If you look at Stephon Diggs here, this is a pretty good situation for this Minnesota secondary here. Whenever you look at kind of how things are going, I really like the rapport that basically they're showing with Case Keenum. I mean, Case Keenum has been able to do almost anything that he wants to do so far. And then you look a little bit further down the line, and I mean, they got a starting corner out in Atlanta. I mean, I think this is one of the situations where both of these guys could be in potential to have a really big day this week. So Robbie Anderson, gotta love me some Robbie Anderson. If I mention Josh McCown, I gotta like Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson, I think we gotta realize Robbie Anderson is no longer a one-trick pony. I think he's actually a player. I think he's actually a guy that can get it done for us. And whenever you look, like, there's very few guys who really and truly have the upside of 100 plus yards and 2 touchdowns, and Robbie Anderson's that guy. We've seen it already. So I mean, he's a guy that we got to take seriously here. He is a guy that can actually absolutely take the top off of the defense, and a guy that we got to look at. Corey Davis burned us all last week. I'm not going to go back to Corey Davis, though. If Rashard Matthews is out, it's a fine play. I think it's fine. I just won't go there. I don't like the way Marcus Mariota looks, to be perfectly honest. It's not even so much on Corey Davis, who really hadn't gotten a ton of separation anyway, but I don't think I can go back there strictly based off Marcus Mariota. Alshon Jeffrey, I don't think that this Seattle secondary with all the injuries is anything we have to fear anymore. Carson Wentz playing like the MVP right now. I'll take his number 1 wide receiver basically all day long. And as much as we joke about how terrible Blake Bortles is, if you watch this podcast or any of the other stuff that we do, I mean, listen, Indianapolis' secondary is absolutely atrocious. I mean, they've been bitten by the injury bug on top of not being very talented anyway. And I think Blake Bortles might have a decent day. And if that's the case, then we got to look at his number 1 receiver there in Marquise Lee. against an Indianapolis secondary that I think is very vulnerable. So listen, let's fire him up. We'll hold our nose. We'll click on him, knowing that Blake Bortles is his quarterback. But that being said, sometimes we just got to play these guys in really good matchups. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us here on Week 13 Draft Report. Again, head over to dfsreport.com. You can get all of your DFS needs over there. When you do, head to your favorite app store, download the Draft app, or go to draft.com and use the promo code REPORT, REPORT, and you will get a free $3 entry to a real money contest. Good luck this week. We'll see you in Week 14.